Before we start, maybe I'll give some context as to today's topic, right? And also Salina. So this session is inspired by the production that's happening from since yesterday and until 4th May. And it's centered on Pak Samad Said's seminar novel called Salina. Yeah. So today's session, we aim to examine how the turbulence of war, colonial rule, and the struggle for national identity shape the themes, narratives, and artistic expressions of the era, the post-war era. Yeah, and as we know, the World War II was a watershedding point in history, right? And which saw political and social turmoil, and it gave rise to nationalism and determination towards independence. Yeah, and in this period itself, we witnessed the active articulation of Malay nationalism and cultural assertion. Yeah, and this was definitely manifested in our literary works, in perhaps the performing arts, which we will learn more with our speakers later. Yeah. Okay. So without further ado, let's invite our first speaker, Miss Annaliza Bakri, who holds a Master of Arts from the Department of Malay Studies at NUS, and her research interests include ideology and its impact on literature and language education. Her writings, interviews, and literary translations have been published. There are numerous publishing, Budi Kritik, and also she translated a few award-winning works, So without further ado, Miss Annaliza, please.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time off, to spend with us this morning. I think some of us rushed to submit our votes. If you have not, please do so. Okay. I think when we talk about conflict as a catalyst, I think we need to understand what we understand by conflict and what it can give rise to. So one of the things that when Liana gave me this topic, we try to link conflict to literature. And one of the things that if we survey the literary works, it would include injustice. It would include problems, social ills. And we then ask ourselves, why do the writers want to write about such things? Because conflict also involves trauma. Conflicts involve oppression, right? There are a lot of things that will give rise to conflicts. And in this sense, when we talk about literature per se, we talk about conflict giving or even developing narrative. So that is where literature comes into play. The kind of narrative that has been influenced by the conflicts that we face in life. I think all of us have actually gone through some kind of conflicts, like even in our day-to-day activities and interactions. And that is where I would like to also push further, not just conflict as a catalyst, but also the contestations that come along with it. So we move on to the second part. This one I must give credit to one of our librarians, Mazlan. So actually he had an article, Early Malay Printing in Singapore, that was published in Biblo Asia, October 2017. So here, he actually mentioned that in the early 19th century, the missionaries of the London Missionary Society set up stations in Malacca, Penang, Singapore, and Batavia, with the ultimate aim of penetrating China and converting the Chinese to Christianity. But more importantly, I would like to bring out this very important point, which I think is that in Singapore itself, the Malay printing and publishing houses were established mainly by immigrants from Java. And they settled in Kampung Glam, in the vicinity of Sultan Mosque, a bustling commercial center back then already, in the 19th century. So just a flashback, two of the most prolific Malay printers were Haji Muhammad Said bin Haji Arshad of Semarang and Haji Muhammad Siraj bin Haji Saleh of Rembang. And Haji Muhammad Said and his sons published more than 200 Malay language publications between 1873 and 1918. And in the same period, Haji Muhammad Siraj published around 80 books. Then you probably wonder why I want to bring this up. Okay, the reason is number one, you need to have the platform. You need to have the kind of support, the kind of systems put in place for you to actually have writings being published or books being published, articles, newspapers. So one of the things that with this foundation already laid, right, it's easy for writers then to actually get their works across. So one of the distinct shifts that occurred during the post-war period was the recognition of literature not only as an artistic expression, but also as a cultural manifestation of society. So if we look at World War II, since that's the focus of today's talk, right? In essence, the post-war Malay literature is an evolving cultural domain. So we must understand that culture is not static, it's not stagnant. We move with times. And here we also talk about how the society actually grapple with the conflicts, the contestations, the trauma, the oppression, and how then they give rise to their writings. If some of you who have studied literature, you would have heard of Asas 50, Seni untuk Masyarakat, Art for Society, right? And that is actually what is aligned here, where literature could reflect, influence, and critique the social, political, and economic conditions of the time. So if we look at Asas 50, we can understand why our Bapak Sastrawan, right, fought so hard for it. And in fact, if you watch Salina, or you read Salina, promotion for Salina, please catch the show, okay, you will understand that it is so important for you to actually look at text and context. So the conflict and constatations that the writers wrote in their work or write in their work, they highlight, they develop, is actually what they see and they observe in the real world. So a lot of people say, oh no, it's just fiction, non-fiction, you put these labels, but ask ourselves, are those things actually still happening till today? If it does, then what can we do about it? So actually our Bapak Sastrawan have been doing this activism work, more so than we recognize them for it. So the next thing would be, if we look at also the region moving towards independence, okay, the 1950s, in the aftermath of Japanese occupation and prior to political independence from colonial rule Malaya, including Singapore, was embroiled in the rise of anti-colonial sentiment and British suppression of communist insurgencies, culminating in the Malayan emergency of 1948. So if you look at Salina and you look at the issue of, let's say, Kampung Kambing, for instance, it's not a one-night incident, you know. People have been going through so many things, so many conflicts in their life, one after another. So if you think, oh, after the Japanese occupation, things are fine, what about your colonial masters? What have they done to actually make things better for you? Then what about our own communist attacks and, the rebels and things like that? We ask ourselves, what's the life like back then? I can be very sure I will not survive. I know myself, I will not survive. So these are the things that if we put ourselves in the lives of those people post-World War II, I don't think we can compare our lives now and the kind of things that we are going through right now. So we move on to some of the works. I will not go into detail, but these are the works actually that our Bapak Sastrawan have actually written. And these are the works that actually I really enjoy reading. So from Harun Aminur Rashid to Keris Mas, to Muhammad Arif, Mas, Cikgu Arif, Usman Awang, Masuri SN, and also our Bapak Sastrawan Suratman Makassar. So they talk about displacement, they talk about alienation, they talk about being forced to leave their kampungs and live in high-rise flats. Maybe for people like us, tingkat 24, nothing lah, you know. But imagine if you live in a kampung, hanging out your clothes at level 24, how would you feel about that, right? So again, put ourselves in the lives of others, and then, what I feel from these works, right? They are talking about humanity, actually. Do we have that humanness in us? When we talk about conflicts, how do we react as human beings to such conflicts, okay, to such problems that they actually highlight? And then we look at what is it for Malay language then? But really, when we talk about Malay language back then, post-World War II, everyone is trying to get an identity. Okay, what kind of identity are we going to craft? What kind of identity are we going to grapple with? And one of the things that people fall back on, realizing it consciously or not, is language. right? The language that you pick. At that point in time, Malay language being the lingua franca already, it's not like something that we craft out of nowhere. We already have a lingua franca of the region, not just in Singapore, Malaya, but in the region, okay? And it became a very central element, okay, in the construction of national consciousness and unity. So if we look at the Literary and Language Congress and Seminars, today we have MABIM, we have MASTRA, and what is more important about this Congress, okay, is the fact that they bring together intellectuals, writers, journalists, activists, okay, and advocates as well, of course, okay, who are invested in the promoting or the promotion of Malay language and literature. And this is where I feel that when you have a language that is a political tool, of course, it will give rise to conflict as well, right? I think there was a period of time where they wanted to change Majula Singapura to another language. How do we feel about that? But what is actually more heartwarming to me is that non-Malays fighting for it, to say that it should remain in the Malay language. So again, we know that there are political tools out there. Then the next thing would be, we ask ourselves the function of literature. So when there's language, there will always be literature, right? Because language, again, you know, we already know that it's a political tool. We want to use it correctly. And this is by Shahruddin Ma'ruf, the former head of the Department of Malay Studies, NUS. I think some of you may know him. Very scary man, but very critical, very sharp mind. Okay, so I like the word that he used, the battleground. It is. There's no such thing if you belong to the seni for masyarakat, kan? Seni untuk masyarakat, art for society. There's no such thing as la la land. You jolly well have something good to say. You jolly well have a cause to fight for. And it's a battleground for ideas. And here, ideas means also ideology. Okay, what do we want to fight for? And when we talk about ideology, there will also be vested interests in play. Right? And we talk also about, you know, how writers seek legitimacy for their values and morality. Which is why I think I have a lot of respect for the Bapak Sastrawan, and of course Ibu Sastrawan. Okay, the reason is because for them to actually observe something that is so traumatizing, so oppressive, and to seek ways to give light to such issues is actually very commendable. It's very courageous. I think right now also, if we talk about, let's say, political contestations and conflict, not everyone has that language to write and speak, and then to, you know, to utter and to articulate what they truly mean. And then you know, the pantun that they come up with, these are actually political tools. So if you use it correctly, it can work in your favor. And one of the things that we also want to talk about is that Malay literature is Malay social history in the art form. I will explain a little more later on. So Ungi Wationgo, another favorite writer of mine, also mentioned this. The persuasion can take the form of a direct appeal on behalf of writers' open doctrine or an indirect one. So again, the writers have a reason to write. I'm not sure, maybe because I also belong to Seni Untuk Masyarakat, so I probably am biased myself. So this is where I also want to say, we have a lot of biases in ourselves, so we need to be quite conscious about it. So this is where I bring out this point. Literary texts, in actual fact, they are actually, or the works are alternative social history, whether we like it or not, especially if you come from the strand of Asas 50. And the observations and documentations are not void of biases and emotions. We are human beings, we need to recognize that. So it's important to accept what has been revealed and shared with great care and good understanding. Again, I can't stress this more, context and text. You need to form that relation. A lot of us, maybe, we are also guilty of passive reading. But having said that, these literary texts open doors to the reader and critic to identify and unravel the episodes that are essential in our understanding of Singapore history. So I remember when I went for an FGD many years back. This year we celebrate SG60, right? So probably a decade ago, when we were preparing for SG50, bicentennial, right? So we talk about how we want to craft out Singapore history, right? And I brought up a point. I said, yeah, you can refer to Raffles, you can refer to colonial records, but you cannot forget one thing, your Malay literary work. So for instance, we are right now in the process of translating Syair Singapura Terbakar, the Singapore Fire. It's a very important context or text. Then there's also Syair Kampung Glam Terbakar. There's also Syair Tengku Prabu, right? These works cannot go offline or off record because they give a very important basis to Singapore's history. So we have works besides Munshi Abdullah that we need to give credit to because again, they are alternative social history. Okay, but of course we understand, right? It's not just about hang tua hang jebat lah, you know. It's more than that, right? So make sure you read carefully lah. You know, read carefully. You know, context. Don't just quote out of the blue. Very scary, you know. For student of literature, I perspire already, you know. Okay. So next. Alamak, can or not? Okay. Okay, so some of the dominant issues, as I mentioned, they are alternative social history. The writers are also observers and also people who care for the society. So on that position of care, perhaps they also feel that they come from a position of privilege. Most of them are Malay teachers or journalists, okay, before they became politicians, okay, some of them. So one of it that I felt that we look at the first point will be questionable leadership of the ones in power. Okay, it's not a recent affair or a recent issue. It's something that humanity, mankind, will have to grapple with from time to time. Election or non-election, we must always question the leadership. Okay, I'm not just talking about political leadership, right? Even leadership at home, right? At least for me, will be in school lah. Right, we have to question. Okay, so I want to bring the context of Syair Tengku Prabu because I want to show that it is not new. It's actually a very continuous kind of thing, which is also scary. Okay, to remind readers to be critical of the leadership, the kind of leadership the people are subjected to. Okay, so there's an example here. Unfortunately, I did not translate it. Maybe next time. Okay, so basically, he talks about the Sultanate. Right, the Sultanate era, and how we have to be critical, because there is a phrase, that doctrine, where they say that Raja disembah, right? So you always have to bow down, you have to obey the Sultan. But how do we put that into context today, right? So we have to question ourselves. Okay, we have to question ourselves. And then the next one, okay, will be Muhammad Latif Muhammad. So even if it's in a it's in a puisi form, poetry, there are still things for you to actually extract from. Okay, so again, talks about the poor leadership of Sultan Hussein, who signed the treaty with Stamford Raffles. And one of the things here is that the critical Malay nationalism. Must remember, they wrote it at that period of time. Okay, nationalism is also one of the things that they were grappling with. And then also, more importantly, okay, we should not be ahistorical. It's very sad when, you know, people say, I don't care lah, history only in school, right? Just memorize facts. It's not just memorize facts, okay? So because we are going to construct the new history, okay? The history that our children will be reading. What kind of history that we want them to read, okay? So yeah, this one I translated it because it was part of the anthology. So I just had to, you know, easily copy and paste. So again, also because Cikgu Latif, arwahnya, yeah, the late Cikgu Latif, he feel very strongly for Singapore, very, very strongly for Singapore. And also the plight of the Malay community. So often enough, we think that he's being quite, he's like a Malay nationalist. But actually when I spoke to him, he actually clarified. He said, when the Malay community managed to overcome the problems, right, we get rid of stereotypes. And later on I will explain a bit more, because stereotypes are also one of the hindrances that the Malay community face. And when we get rid of stereotypes, then the nation can actually move forward. Because then the non-Malays will not view us in a certain light. Okay? Again, it's all about optics, right? So we have to be very careful when we read certain works. And then we look at inefficient and ineffective administration of internal affairs. Hey, this one not political presentation, okay? I must clarify, okay? This one is because of their works, okay? Of the works that I... At that time. Okay, so even if you look at, let's say, poor planning, so we thought, okay, maybe it's a one-off incident. Actually, it's not. So again, I'd like to go back to history. So as I mentioned, Syair Singapura terbakar and Syair Kampung Glam terbakar. We always had fires back then. But of course, we understand the context, the kind of materials that were being used to build the buildings and the kind of construction, the architecture, how much money do we have to build our kampung houses back then, right? But then, in today's time, flooding. Right, we have flooding. Flooding still occurs. Ponding. Okay, so Abdul Ghani Ahmed, Pak Ghani, also mentioned that in his poem, Kampung Kembangan. See? Consistent, guys. Very consistent. Okay, so we have like Choa Chu Kang, 1978, Potong Pasir, 1954, and then we have Orchard Road. But the fact is, we do have such problems. And like it or not, we cannot just say takdir Tuhan lah, it's fated or it's destined, right? We must actually take into context. The floodings have happened for a very long time. What can we do about it, right? These are the old times, but 2012, not very long ago, only 13 years ago, right? And today, I think we also have, was it Yishun? Forever Yishun, right? I think there was some kind of flooding that happened in Yishun because of the heavy rain. Again, climate change. We view climate change. What can we do about it? Okay. And then oppressive labor and low wages. I think all of us want more money, right? Okay. And then we also just celebrated May Day, Labor Day. So we talk about low wages. Okay. So back then, people like Osman Awang, also known as Tongkat Warren, okay, talk about how the low wages actually help. If you have so little, how much can you save? If you have so little, how much can you invest? And this is also the problems that we face with today's context. Okay, we talk about recession, we talk about Trump. Anyway, US dollar went down. Okay, so we talk about so many things, right? And working in schools, I also know that sometimes students don't have the money. So even if we give them, let's say, $7 a day, we talk about the real world. Right? And people are actually, some of us probably think, oh, we are already middle class. Yeah lah, working middle class lah. If we don't work, got no money, no money to pay bills and stuff like that, right? But we talk about equal wages. We talk about low wages of our migrant workers. We talk about our domestic helpers. How much have we actually given the kind of rights to them? So money-wise, have they actually been given the correct amount of wages? And then we talk about the facets of poverty. Okay, so in Masuri SN poem Umpama, okay, depicts the same problem of abusing laws and regulation for material gains. As we move forward, when we talk about modernization, what will be our take on capitalism? Right? So how much or how materialistic are we? Then we talk about how to uphold justice and values. I think there are a lot of things that we need to care for. We talk about the community, the Malay community, for instance. What are we grappling with besides not getting enough wages? The kind of poverty in material wealth. Okay, how much do we? Where do we draw the line? Right? Where do we draw the line? And then next. We talk about it as also the bane of destruction. Here I talk about morality. So in Megadona or Pak Ghani, another Pak Ghani, okay, in his novel he talks about the idea of materialism as one of the factors that caused the loss of the Malay identity. So he talks about the erosion of Malay values and traditions. Actually, it is quite scary because I teach Malay language, right? It's actually quite scary because our students no longer know, for instance, peribahasa. Okay, actually simple words also what's that? What's that? The kind of programs, because we need to do this. If we don't, then it will totally be eroded. And then Sapi Ahmad Razali, I think some of you probably have heard of him. A very brilliant writer, but I don't know where he is right now. Yeah, I think there's another book that he wrote, Tempat Tinggal or something. Excellent work. So he also talked about, how we strive to the top. So dia macam, like dog eat dog world kind of thing, So where we backstab each other, we talk bad about each other, and then, because we have no regard. So this one I want to link to humanity. Okay, as you climb the top, don't forget the people who left behind. So my mentor, Dr. Azhar, has reminded me of this before. The fact that I am here means someone did not get the chance, right? Because I'm taking over somebody's place. So if I am here, then I must make it worthwhile. And what can I do to help others? Because every time you take a place of someone, that means somebody didn't get that chance, that opportunity. So what can you do to make life better for those who are left behind? So I thought it was a very good reminder for me to also share with all of you today. So how much do we sacrifice and be sacrificed in the terms of, or in the world of capitalism? So we need to go back to the values that we hold on to. So bring me to the last point that I want to talk about for today. So ideal versus reality. So we want to compare some things here. So I thought it was very important to look at post-World War II. Our grandparents go through that. Then you probably like, why I never stay at Lorong Sarina? Interesting, right? If I stay at Lorong Sarina, that kind of thing. But you must understand, not everybody has the same kind of privilege and luxury back then. Again, it's all about opportunity. Who get that opportunity, right? Who gets the opportunity? So if you look at the one on your left, on the left, that photo, last days at Singapore, seen on the quayside at Singapore, as women and children were evacuated from the city shortly before the Japanese onslaught on the island. All right, Singapore Office of War. This is from the Museum of US Navy. I'm not sure how clear it is for the people at the back, but you can look, number one, the nationality of the people. Okay, they are getting ready to leave Singapore. What the kind? Well, look at that. Okay, maybe you can imagine the resources that they have to be able to leave Singapore. Okay, not everyone can leave, right? Okay, our Samsung women did not manage to leave. Okay, a lot of people did not manage to leave actually. Okay, so compare it to the right side. We talk about comfort women in Singapore, and is theatre coming at Ken Hill? Ken Hill, right? Yeah, so I actually thought of you guys, I was like, why does Ken Hill sound so familiar? Okay, so apparently some of the places where the comfort women came to is actually Ken Hill. Okay, we have Ken Hill, we have Jalan Jurong Kecil, Beauty World around Bukit Timah Village, and also, of course, Sentosa. So these are people who did not get to live. Did not get to live is one thing, then suffer terribly because they did not get to live. Okay, and of course we also have the Korean women who were brought in. Okay, but we also have locals who suffered as comfort women. Their stories have not really been widely discussed. Okay, so this is why I bring this up, because we're going to talk about Salina. Okay, so the last point will be debunking stereotypes and prejudice. So this is what I saw when I read Salina. Okay, I think the Malay community, kita selalu kata pelacur. Actually, Malay community got very nice term, kupu-kupu malam. The night butterfly. Very nice, pelacur. It's so jahat, okay? You have a nice word, okay? Because I think the Malay community also understands that a social worker has no morals or value is wrong. You look at Salina. Salina actually has a lot of values. She cares so much for Hilmi. That compassion is something that you can't buy. That kindness and generosity, where she said this, right? I remember. Pardon me if I got it wrong. Something like, bilang kakak kalau tak ada duit, kakak akan kerja. And she's a prostitute. So when she says she's going to work, means she's going to sell her body, just so that Hilmi can get that education. So it's amazing, right? If any one of us, helping someone that you don't know actually, it's just a neighbor, right? Hilmi, just a neighbor, what? Would you do that? Right? So the kind of compassion, I think A. Samad Said has debunked that already. And in his time, during when Salina was written, remember Yasmin Ahmad, right? Yasmin Ahmad also talked about kupu-kupu malam, the prostitute, right? The ustad talked to the prostitute, right? But A. Samad Said actually surpassed that already back then. He already highlights it. Treat all human beings with respect. treat them with human dignity, regardless of their profession. So, okay, and then a woman with a tainted past cannot change or be redeemed. How sad is that? You never give people chance. Today we talk about yellow ribbon, right? So again, we talk about it, right? Only the poor or uneducated turn to vice. Please lah. You agree or not? No, right? Of course not. You know the one who take money, quite rich, what? Very educated, what? Right? Then, society is just and fair in judging people. We are the worst. Human beings are the worst. We judge people all the time, myself included. Okay? Religious people are always morally upright. Siapa nama Datuk tu?
Haji Karman.
Haji Karman. Talk, but got help or not? Never help. Right? So again, religious people, they are very good at giving out doctrines. Okay? Nasihat lah, advice and everything. But when it comes to the real thing, do they even judge you? They do. Masuk neraka, you'll go to hell, that kind of thing. But we also know of religious people, even in recent news, right, who have taken advantage of young kids, who have taken advantage of, like scammers. They become scammers. We have heard of it. So again, be a bit more, what they call that, careful. Okay? Then personal morality is fixed and absolute. I think in Salina tried to change. Okay, Salina tried to change when Khadijah advised her. She tried. Okay, whether or not she did, it's something that you have to watch lah. And then you ask Cik Atin, okay, for more info. Okay, war ends when the fighting stops. I think all of us today, we are witnesses to what's happening around the world. We know that the war does not end when the fighting stops. The war actually continues, building up your life after the war. Salina came from a very rich family. Okay, what happened to her after the Japanese occupation? She became a prostitute. She suffered under the hands of Abdul Fakkar, who is going to be acted by a very handsome actor, Fri Rahman. So must watch. Okay, and also I think the fact that even Zarina, right? How she actually wanted to sell her daughter, Nadira. Okay, and then also the kind of atrocities that they have to go through. In fact, if you look at the word kampung kambing, kambing is good, right? Kampung kambing. Sometimes you wonder why would people want to stay at kampung kambing? The place is dirty, dilapidated. You have to queue up to take water, and then you have to wait for the baising to not be around, is it? Then you can take water, that kind of thing. So these are things that you think the war ends just because the fighting stops, just because we stop gunning and shooting each other, life goes back to the rosy things that we have. No, it doesn't. So then the next one will be only men's stories define the nation's history. This is where I think, I read some reviews about Salina. They talk about how, A. Samad Said portrays Salina as a loose woman, immoral woman, This is so typical of male writers, putting women in a very negative light, But if you think about it, actually this story is Salina's story. It's from her point of view, actually, although it's as if written by Hilmi, right? But it's actually her point of view as well. Her thoughts, her emotions, her struggles. Hilmi is just a storyteller, in my opinion. Hilmi is just a storyteller. A. Samad Said is actually focusing on the life of Salina. So the history that is being written is actually based on the struggles and the conflicts that Salina go through. So this is why I think most importantly, before I end, I need to add this point, that Salina is actually one of the things that when you read Salina, although it comes from Salina's story, the struggle is a class struggle. Okay, it's not a Malay community struggle. In fact, Kampung Kambing had other people as well, other races as well. It's a class struggle, and many a time we forget. We are very trained and guided, right? We have our CMIO. So we look at, it's a Malay problem, it's a Chinese problem, it's an Indian problem. We put labels. But actually this is a class struggle that cuts across races and religions for that matter. Okay? So when you are poor, Poor doesn't look at, race. War suffering doesn't look at race. Okay? It is a class struggle. So if, let's say, you look at the photo just now, who has the privilege to leave Singapore? Right? It's not about the race per se, it's the privilege. So again, when we talk about Salina, I think it's very important for us to also understand what it means of urban poverty in today's time. Okay, we also talk about gender shifts. So A. Samad Said is really brilliant. So he has really been pushing for such things. And also about how he humanized a sex worker. That is really very brilliant, commendable to me. He humanized a sex worker. He did not glorify prostitution. I must disclaimer. He did not glorify prostitution, but he felt that it was more pertinent to highlight that he demanded empathy where society offered none. So with that, right, I feel that A. Samad Said novel, Salina, added that strand of humanity during hard times that we often forget as human beings. Yeah. So that will be all. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Anna, for your sharing. So, what Anna did was to kind of give us in this short presentation, she gave a summary of what Malay literature offered to us and continues to offer to us, because as you can see, the topics that are raised by our writers are not of rainbows and confetti, right? So if you think that literature is something, you read to feel good. Dr. Azhar always he's also my mentor, he's always reminding us that if you think that specifically Malay literature is a feel-good kind of thing when you read, I can sleep well, no. In fact, if you read our works by our bapa-bapa and ibu-ibu sastrawan, you cannot sleep at night, because they highlight the things or happenings in our society which we often take for granted, and the marginalized, basically the poor, people who are at the fringes of society. Yeah. Okay. So now let's move on to Rafia's sharing. And before she starts, maybe I will give her a short introduction. Rafia, she started writing for television in the 90s, more notably for Semarak Budaya, and then today, more recently, she usually works on Sihat Oh Sihat, Zakat SG, and Warna Ramadan. She's also a playwright and has several stage scripts to her name. And also, she had a debut, playwriting debut, Geisha. She wrote Kisah Cinta Romzi dan Joleha, which was staged at Esplanade in 2008. She then wrote Ayam Den Lape, Arba'ah, and Senja Cruz. And she's also the dramaturg, for Salina, right? So without further ado, let's invite Rafia for her sharing. Yeah?
Okay, Bismillah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, MHC. Thank you, Esplanade. This is a disclaimer. This is my sharing. I am not an academic. I am not an anthropologist. I am not a historian. I'm a dramaturg, and I like to read. And that's it. Okay, so first of all, if we were to move on, just now it was really thoroughly covered, the part on literature. Now let's talk about theatre. Not as robust as literature, because I feel theatre is a family effort. It is not a personal one. So to drive theatre within that period of time would be very hard. Okay, so but we had the traditional form, Malay theatre, which was the Bangsawan. Okay, Bangsawan, which was it actually went into decline before the occupation. Okay, but after the occupation, their fates were sealed, and it was no longer profitable to do Bangsawan. Okay, also, theatre as mirror of societal change and the rise of nationalist themes. Later on, we had groups, more contemporary groups of that time. First, Riwana in the 1950s, and then later on in the 1970s, that pushes to talk about societal changes. Okay, social commentary, talk about education, talk about nationalist themes, housing and everything that rebuilding Singapore needed. So those were the themes, and it laid the groundwork for later theatre groups to come. Okay. So Bangsawan, popular in the 1900s. Because we actually did, theatre kami did Indra Bangsawan one time, and then all of us had to, do this and recreated this picture. Okay, remember that? Yeah, okay. So it was popular from the 1900s, even during the Japanese occupation. It was used as, because Japanese love Bangsawan, don't know why. So they actually became the patron of Bangsawan troupe. But of course, their themes would be on Japan and imperialism lah. Okay, and then because after the war, everyone was no longer interested because they needed money. Okay, our actors, directors needed money, so they looked for jobs elsewhere. The prima donnas became singers, and some of them, the actors, became joget girls or singers. And then, of course, we have the musician that move on from playing for Bangsawan troops to become musicians in our amusement malls. Okay, and then we also have patrons who were paying for these Bangsawan troops to perform are no longer interested, or they no longer actually have the financial abilities to do so. Okay, and of course the rise of cinema and TV. Okay, when the talkies came in, the Hindi movies, Tamil movies came in, everyone wanted to prefer that because it looks like, it is not something that came out of locally, because it's something that came out from other countries, so it became more popular. And touring troops were not, I think everybody disbanded lah, basically. But in 1950s, I think they tried to revive Bangsawan through the radio, Radio Bangsawan. Okay. And what was common, whether or not, whether it's Bangsawan, whether it's Sandiwara, whatever, the common theme was that about poverty after the war, after occupation, colonialism, and the effects of war on them. Okay, and theatre also became a tool for political awareness. Okay, if not theatre, very much in literature as well. So I purposely chose this photo because I really wanted all of you to know how A. Samad Said looked like without all the fuss. Yeah, okay, this was, I think, he actually wrote Salina when he was 23. First as an entry in the newspaper, titled Gerhana, and then he was asked to repackage, include more pages. There were like 400-ish pages at that point of time. It was like big deal because everyone else was writing a 100-page book on novels, but he was writing a almost 500 pages of book because it was very flashy. Why it was called a masterpiece? Basically because every single character in Salina was fleshed out. It was wholesome. We know the backstory of almost every one of them. Okay, and why I chose to say born in Malacca, he was actually my kampung person. He is from Durian Tunggal, and he was raised in Serangoon. He followed his parents when he was 6 months old to Singapore. The father was a bus driver, and the mother was a suri rumah lah, right? But one thing that struck me when he said, saya menjadi dewasa dan mengenali hidup dalam bentuk yang seburuk-buruknya. I grew up, in the worst of situations. Okay, so he actually lived in Jalan Besar, and I pored over the old maps. That Jalan Besar, it was like the house is where French Road is right now. That is where Kampung Kambing that he imagined to be was. And in front and at the back of that kampong is actually not a village. Don't have this in your head that Kampong Kambing is actually a village with atap roofs and all that. No, it was makeshift. Those were kandang kambing, goats, what sheds. Okay, so it belongs to the indented Indian criminals that came to Singapore and took over that area to raise their kambing, their goats, and it was converted because they wanted to make money, right? So they converted these sheds into small rooms, like setinggan lah, like that, right? So slums. So imagine they do not have toilets, no water sources. So it came from the municipal building, which was at French Road. There was an abattoir where slightly further away, but right at the back was the quarters, municipal quarters, where the Indian workers from PWB was working at for. So yes, it was not theirs. So these Kampung Kambing people will go there to get water and so on, right at night. Not in the day because yes, the sing will pelangkong them lah. That's the word that they use. Okay, so let's move on. Oh yeah, he was a student of Victoria School, guys. Okay. Of Salina and Tipinki, I chose these two because Tita Kami staged this. Salina was written because of his, Salina and Tipinki because of his, he cannot forget that part of his life, the experiences, and because he became the observers at the age of 15. He said that he wrote so much of the vices in Salina and Tipinki because of out of his own personal experiences. He said he is stealing, gambling, involved with something, and the influences of the people around him. So he has done that. So because of these observations, he was able to write Salina based on Women on the Streets. Because French Road, beyond that was Victoria School, above was New World, and to the left we have Syed Alwi Road and we have the Desker Road. So the people around him were penari joget, New World, and the prostitutes lah, basically at Desker Road. Okay, so based on Women of the Street, who actually, one of them, paid for him his school fees. So Hilmi is actually him. If I were to say, that is the character that he wrote based on himself. And Tipinki, he lived among the penari joget, so he was able to easily back and forth school, observe the ongoings at the New World amusement malls and parks. Okay. Major themes in Salina: the survival and morality. Okay. He said, a kampong kambing is not just Salina is not Salina, is the people in kampong kambing as well. So it is not just a group of it is a group of oppressed people who were unable to think. This is what I translated lah. Okay, I read in Malay first lah. Mereka ialah kelompok masyarakat yang terdera dan tidak sempat atau tidak mampu berfikir di luar daripada kesengsaraan semasanya. Okay, group of oppressed people unable to or did not think outside their current suffering. Yeah, so survival and morality for Siti Salina, who actually came from very good background, very manja, very protected, sheltered, but lost her family, and the only thing that she knew how to do, or she gave thought to, was becoming a prostitute at that time. And social injustice and poverty. Kampong Kambing, like I've explained, is marginalized. For the marginalized people, very forgotten. They live in filth, no sanitation, no water, and so on and so forth. And the people there, you see, technically, they do not have any direction. So if it comes, I'll do it. But it's different for Hilmi. Okay, he has got he has got things that he wants to do. He aspires to be, and that's where Salina comes in. And the hypocrisy of society. We have Haji Karman, the preacher, but he does not offer any help. It is just basically to condemn. Okay, and finally, the women's strength in Salina. Okay, why the focus on women? In post-war Malaya, women had to bear double burdens. They were expected to be the homemakers, but they were also expected to be joining the labor force after the war. They needed to find money. Why? Because most of their husbands or male family members were no longer around. So they had to survive. So Nahida, Makja, Salina were not only confined to their homes. They had to go out and find work. Okay? Social expectations, they need to be role models, but they also need to survive the only way they know. Okay, so for Makja, being the tukang cuci baju, okay, and then for Nahida, the stepmother wanted her to become the pelayan, and then we have Salina. Okay, and then there is no empathy for them. Nobody cared. Okay, so these are actually the unsung symbol of resilient spirit, I feel. Okay. 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 Significance of Salina. Overall, it shows the despair and chaos after the occupation. Nobody knew what to do after that, how to go about doing it. Nobody has answers. Nobody had answers then. Okay? And until today, researchers, whether local or foreign, are still studying the text to find out more about the context of that time. Shows cultural dislocation. It is a very, very, like I said, flashy novel. No character is allowed to stand without being fully understood. That's Pak Samad. That is the reason why the book was a bit hard. Was it hard for you to read it? Struggling. Yeah, I do not know. I think I read the book a few times, not because I wanted to, but because I had to understand it. Yeah, and then the remnants of the occupation put in the people this feeling of uncertainty, of displacement. And they were all like, they want to scramble for jobs, but they do not know where to go. So we had like a character saying that, hey, you are trying to get a job at Robinson. And then which Robinson? The Robinson Petang, the Beach Road, or the real Robinson for a clerk job. Or, penarik beca. Those were the kind of jobs that they could find to survive. And that's it. So advancement, I think only could have happened in Hilmi. Right? And then this was also at the edge of a Merdeka period where the restructuring of the country was happening. So a lot of uncertainty. I think at that point of time, even the government, the governing powers were not sure what they wanted, what they had to do. Okay? And then how is it relevant? So it is, like you said just now, the empathy part and a non-judgment. Pak Samad said, tidak semua yang hina itu hina, tidak semua yang agung itu mulia. So in Salina, we know that do not judge her the way you always, or we would judge a person like her. Not everything lowly is despicable. Okay? And this is actually her Pak Samad's critique of moral hypocrisy. And he wants us to be able to empathize and humanize and have humanity towards our marginalized people. And it is a picture of how poverty and survival happen at that point of time. So the time period is actually probably from the 1951 to the 1958 Pak Samad's play. Pak Samad's book. So Theatre Kami has, I think this is our third staging. The first one being the script by Johan Jaafar. It did not follow the chronological order. So a lot of people feedback that it was quite difficult to understand. So in 1997, Cik Atin Ahmad adapted and make it slightly more chronological, and it also follows the same thing this year, 2025. But because back then in 1997 we had all the time of our life to stage, it was like a 3-hour, 15-minute staging. But I think our current audience do not have that kind of stamina. And then the ones who have that kind of stamina, like us, our legs cannot handle really. We needed some time to stretch. So we had to really look into the script and flesh out as much as we can, what we can put in and what we have to, I'm sorry, cut. You know, and to keep it to about 2.5 hours lah. I think that is how much the audience can handle. So it went through a lot of filtering and trying to ensure that the continuity is not lost. And I do not know whether, I know this is like, we were just talking about it, we have some scenes that we really had to hack. So probably we want to have our social media editor's cut version. Yeah, really we couldn't. This is such a monumental work of Pak Samad that we do not want to dishonor lah.
So I think we can wrap up today's talk. Again, I would like to thank our speakers for sharing perspectives, their understanding of Malay art, be it sastra, literature, or also theatre, right? I think what is important today is we kind of unpack the big the big themes or values that our writers want to bring forward in their works. And I hope, as I said just now, I hope our young writers continue to do so as well. I think what is important when our young ones or our readers read literary works, especially Malay literary works, is that understand the big ideas that is being brought forward, right? Values of humanity, empathy, caring for one another, caring about the poor, the marginalized, right? All these voices which will not be represented in mainstream, in today's world, we call it media, mainstream media, might not be covered. And that is the role of our writers at that point of time where, there wasn't social media, no TV. So how do we tell people of all these stories? Through literary works, through articles in newspapers, yeah? So maybe I can just wrap up today's discussion by a quote from Dr. Shardin Ma'ruf. He said, Malay literary works, and by extension, theatre works, yeah, they are not just the literature of any other people. It cannot be considered merely as a collection of stories, mere caprices of the imagination of writers. They are imbued with social and cultural meanings far beyond the apparent documentary meanings they contain. Within the pages of Malay literary works are contained the various phases of Malay cultural history, recording the trend of ideas and values which had contributed to the shaping of Malay culture, thought, and consciousness.